Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Artist Talk. My name is Jennifer Chang, and I'm the head of marketing here at Playform. Playform is a new kind of studio for innovative artists defining new ways of creating and selling art in the age of AI. We provide artists with the capabilities to train their own AI without writing any code. Today, we'll be hearing from Playform's first ever artist in residence, Katya Grokhovsky. Katya Grokhovsky is an extraordinary artist and curator with a unique perspective on the world. Katya was born in the Ukraine and raised in Australia and is currently based in New York. She is the founding director of the Immigrant Artist Biennial, a frequent lecturer at prestigious art schools, and has exhibited her work extensively over the years. Katya's art practice incorporates performance, installation, collage, painting, drawing, and more. She holds an MFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago, a BFA from the Victorian College of the Arts, and a BA Honors in Fashion from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. She is truly a multidisciplinary artist who brings energy and color to everything she touches. You can learn more about Katya at her website at katyagrokhovsky.net. As Playform's artist in residence, Katya received unlimited Playform training credits and direct support from our engineering team to develop a new body of work. We're excited to showcase Katya and the new body of work she created during her month-long residency today. What you're about to see is a story of a symbiotic collaboration between a visionary human artist and her sidekick AI machine. Katya's solo exhibition, Guest from the Future, is now on view on Playform's Artsy Gallery page. This collection is available for sale in full-size edition prints, as well as in smaller postcard size prints. Before I bring on Katya, a little event logistics. We'll be asking everyone to stay muted during the artist talk. If you have any questions, please save them for the end of the session when we'll invite you to unmute yourself and ask Katya any questions you have about her talk. So without further ado, please meet artist Katya Grokhovsky.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Before I begin, just want to thank Jennifer and Ahmed and Maribel for supporting all of this, for making it happen, for inviting me to do the residency, for going along with my ideas. It's been a lot of fun playing and exploring a new digital realm. I'm a very multidisciplinary artist, as Jennifer mentioned, and I like to explore new avenues for my practice all the time. Before lockdown in New York, I was heavily sort of playing with sculpture in my studio, and then lost my studio and went back to painting digitally on my computer. So I started this project called Postcards from America, which was kind of a way to timestamp our situation. And I started digitally painting on sort of old Disneyland snapshots, theme parks, and sort of painting over them, collaging them, etc. So I applied with that body of work to the Playform residency, and I really wanted to explore possibilities of moving further into painting digitally, collaging, mixing, and exploring what else is there. So what you're looking at on your screen is my AI assistant, Aisa, who I decided to create to give her sort of agency as part of the residency. When I learned that Playform is an AI software, I'm kind of obsessed, I guess, with sci-fi. And I grew up with a lot of sort of films, and one of them was called Guest from the Future. It was a Soviet children's movie where a girl travels from 2084 year 2884 to 1984 Soviet Union, and it's very much a utopia and a children's film. I rewatched it right when I started the residency, and the main character is called Alisa, so I wanted to play on the words Alisa and Aisa. So here she is. She's just kind of embodies me. It's a photo of me. It's face tuned, and so she looks like she can come from the past or be part of the future. So I kind of would give her tasks every day to play on Playform, and I wanted to go into actual Playform to show you. Manipulate it, yeah, to show you what it looks like and how I played with images, and then I'll go into what I actually created and how and what were the inputs. So these are some of my projects, and there are thousands of images here, and how it works. And I'll go into earlier projects where I actually input my postcard images. For example, these are the results. So this is already manipulated through AI. And the inputs are, these are stills that are made from that Soviet film. And I input, and you have to input at least 30 images or much more. So at first I would input, and these are some of my postcards that I input, which are already digitally manipulated by me beforehand. So these are already collaged with postcard images and manipulated on Photoshop, etc. And then the results are really always exciting. And in the beginning, I was just learning how to play around with the software and what it actually does. And what I quickly understood that there is a progression which you can see and you can learn how it actually activates the images. So you can see my originals here, the colors coming in from my postcards, etc., etc. These are stills. So it goes through a pretty extensive process, and sometimes this takes hours. And I have a lot of these projects, and so some of the later ones have been images that I downloaded from previous projects on Playform. So there's a lot of mixing going on. And there are several processes here. So I actually really love the more creative morph process, which is to me sort of like collaging. I love adding colors, like seeing what colors. So I would sort of create sets. So these are some of the projects here. And I'll go back into my slides. So in terms of what I put in, these are my postcard images that I put in originally. I think this was one of the first ideas that I had, was put in my actual paintings and see what happens when I merge them with, for example, these are the stills from that film that I was talking about. So this is very much 80s film, flying cars. So I was interested in this futuristic idea. Also, I'm very curious at this point, when I was beginning the residency, how can my work flourish and kind of take on a different, I guess, space, a digital space through AI. So I added, also I wanted to add personal touch, and I added, these are my childhood photos from Soviet Ukraine. So these are the original scans that I asked my dad to send me. So I put them in, I put through also Disney shots, vintage Disney, sort of people dressing up as these Disney characters, toys, etc. So these are some of the inputs that I had. And there are many more, but I kind of kept it to these four, I guess, streams of inputs, because I really wanted to maintain an idea of theme parks, of time travel a little bit between my childhood, migration, the idea of migration, the idea of what will art become in the future, and will machines play a bigger and bigger role. And so these are the earlier experiments from, you can see some of my postcards, the colors. What was interesting, the colors of my postcards kept coming through because I kept putting them into inspiration, I think, side where the color comes in. And then it would take forms of, you can see the Disneyland characters come in, toys. So these are some of my postcards. You can see them being broken down. And I would sometimes pick images in the middle of training where I wasn't sure about them, and I would download them and look at them and maybe play with them again, and then put them back in. So there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of process. It's kind of, to me, it's a lot like painting. So this is, you can see the color of my childhood photos with the postcards. They're starting to merge in a really interesting way. And I was really beginning to understand more and more of how it works. So I would input new images almost daily in the morning, and would ask Aisa to work with me. And in the evening, I would check back what she produced. And sometimes it would be up to 5 different sort of sets of projects. And then new images would come, and there are literally sometimes thousands of images as I was exploring. So I would add color. I would, if I was thinking of black and white, I started adding more and more postcard colors. So there's kind of this interesting painterly exploration happening. And as I was thinking of these images, I kept thinking that it kept becoming more and more me as I was going through the process. I paint a lot, I draw a lot. I also use a lot of ink. So the ink, so this image, for example, is early in the process of training. So you can see it still hasn't merged into something more amorphous. You can still see the sort of all the lines and the toy, but it's already becoming deconstructed. And I'm very interested in that kind of, and this is also early in the process, a sort of what happens to images that we recognize and when they kind of are mixed with AI, and what happens in the end, and where else can that go? So I'm still working on a lot of these images, and I'm thinking, what is the future of them, and how they can be broken down. So these are some of the colors from, there are a lot, there are thousands, and I just picked images that I thought were interesting in process. So something like this, where it's, I think it's dwarfs, 7 dwarfs merged with one of my film stills from the sci-fi Soviet film with my childhood photos. So it's everything's slightly dimmed, and kind of, interestingly, this was sort of washed away and became kind of like a stain. So there are bodies of work where it's sort of really painterly, and some bodies of work that are much more almost really vague kind of ink stains, which took longer to train. So you can add hours to the training model if you really want to push through to the other side, which I don't know what that is, but I was always interested, what is the other side? What happens? So I would pay attention. I would look through a lot of those images as I was showing in the process, what happens, and trying to understand the model, the software, and towards the middle of the residency, I started really understanding that I could really control the process with more controlled sets of images that I feed as inputs. And then still couldn't, I like the idea of surprise. So I still couldn't always control it, of course, but I liked something like this where I knew the shapes would be, it's a child being photographed with a Mickey Mouse figure, but I also understood if I put through some of my postcard images, and some of my postcard images are here, it would really wash away, and the faces specifically, and kind of become really otherworldly, almost nightmarish, which is, I think, why the idea of Disneyland and theme parks specifically during global pandemic came to me, because as an immigrant, my first stop to America, I came here when I was 20 to Hollywood, actually, and I was a student, and I had a scholarship to do an internship at Warner Brothers costume department. So that kind of stuck with me, as all I saw for 3 months was going to the studio really early in the morning and staying late till late, and just working with costumes, working with people, learning about Hollywood, about film production, and thinking maybe I want to work in that. So I ended up going into fashion and then into fine arts. But that experience of, I think, first arriving into just a very controlled environment of a studio stuck with me as a very constructed fictional place. and all the characters, a lot of costuming. I was around that daily. So it sort of shaped this understanding of a fictional. So I'm going through the images just to show some of them are repeated, but already through a longer training process, sort of breaking down. You saw some of the toys. This is a mix with toys and postcard images, some of my digital paintings. So the experience of that, I wanted of my initial experience of the US, I wanted to explore here and also think about my childhood in Soviet Union and also this constant migration and what that means. And I feel like I live sometimes between sort of spatially in different time zones because of my parents are in Australia. My sort of initial culture is Russian. I was born in Ukraine. Soviet Union doesn't exist. So it's also kind of in the past, in a very time capsule sort of there. And now I live in a country that's also falling apart, and to see another place, a place that I've always wanted to be, kind of unraveling in front of my eyes. It's this sort of the impetus of this project, sort of behind the idea of unraveling this kind of deconstructing these images, deconstructing the idea of Disneyland. The color I wanted to keep in a particular color scheme of quite almost toxic, call it toxic color, where it's that kind of digital color slightly too much. It's the digital paint color that I used for postcards. So I kept that in most of these, except the black and white, when some of the sets were just black and white. I wanted to see what happens there too. But I was really interested in this color. So here, for example, there are sets of my childhood photos mixed in with postcards. So the images become blurred up to a point where something like this is so abstract that I was interested in abstract painting at this point as well. And this is an image of a horse, me and a horse as a kid, sort of combined with several sets of postcards digitally painted over. So to me, this idea of past, future, present, and where can this art practice go? Where does it exist? A lot of questions came up in my mind when I was doing this, especially idea of authorship, who is making the work. And I think that's why I really wanted to give my AI assistant a presence. So I would even ask her, Aisa, how are we doing? How's it looking today? What do you think? Because I do a lot of performances as well, and I create characters, and characters help me sort of push some of my ideas further to be really playful. So an idea of AI character, especially being obsessed with sci-fi, really appealed to me, and kind of her being behind this. Of course, she's not real, she's a machine, she's a software, but us spending so much time daily in front of our screens, the reality is very blurred. So this project was really timely. I only gained my studio back recently, and I really enjoyed having this sort of time with just online creating, painting. I haven't seen these images printed yet. I have printed my original postcard images that I've done on different mediums, on fabric, on paper, on canvas. So some of these will be manipulated back to sort of painting, I think, back to installation, back to murals. So I'm very curious to see what will happen here. So here's me still exploring. This is sort of early childhood photos in process that I wanted to show just the beginning of training, when the colors start seeping in. And I find them very interesting because you can still tell what it is, but there's sort of glimpses of, so intervening color, intervening digital. And some of the images have been erased completely because I trained them for quite a while. And I was interested in what happens, what is AI doing with color, with negative space? And they became much, much more abstract in the end. So these are still, there's a childhood photo there. There's some Soviet sci-fi film screenshot. There's several childhood photos. So to me, what the machine is doing is stretching a lot of things, wiping things out, selecting color, washing color over other images, sort of really giving this otherworldly touch. So something like a simple as a photo of my mom, washes away her face, gives it a color from a still that I put in, and kind of becomes an interesting place to be, another abstract. So, and another ink. So these are different bodies of work that I was playing with. I would sometimes use the same photo in many different ways. So something like my horse photo, I would put in childhood photos again, and then input other images to see what happens to color. And sometimes there are a lot of surprises, like these images, I didn't know where that was coming from. So something like very abstract, very washed away. You can see the same images over and over again, just being kind of manipulated. And to me, this was becoming really interesting, thinking about prints and printmaking and how that happens physically as well. So what would happen if I print them and make a lot of additions just with slight variations of the same image? So it's very similar to printmaking, but it's just completely digitally manipulated. And it's not even my hand being manipulating these images. It is a machine. So I think there's a kind of almost a shock element as an artist to understanding that my work is no longer my work, and is it still my work? And I'm still trying to understand this. I don't mind having these questions at all. I think they're very interesting. I think we live in an era where these questions will come up more and more. I think the future looks like an AI assistant will be making a lot of our work anyway. And I don't mind that. Some images are repeating because in bodies of work, they actually, if you put in the same image several times, some of the images come out almost the same way. So it's like very minimal detail variation, which again is closer much more to printmaking, I guess, than painting. And I kept inputting a lot. So I'll go through just to show. And for example, something like the black and white, this is the Disneyland photos with my childhood photos. And so the color is picked up from my childhood photos, but the images are, and some of them are really washed away or slightly distorted. So it feels to me almost like an X-ray vision, nightmarish, which I absolutely love. And I'm thinking of printing them large to see what happens to the details, what happens to pixelation, what happens to when they're printed really large. And these actually a combination of several images here. So I really like this kind of trying to understand what you're looking at, but really you can see that there's almost ghosts. So that it's one on top of another, several layerings. And the biggest surprise here, or to me, it was really interesting, is the surprise element. That at the end of the day, I was really giddy to check out these images and to see what I'm dealing with now and what. And sometimes there are lots of disappointments because I didn't understand my inputs were not too different to each other. Sometimes I prefer the input images to be quite different to each other. So if it's black and white, Soviet, very kind of particular faces, then I would input very colorful Disneyland photos or my postcards. So I can really manipulate and have a lot of surprises. So here again, there's a lot of experiments, and these images were still sort of in process. And sometimes it would be the same process. Like here, there was several of these, which are similar because I positioned them on the page. So I positioned several images on the page in the same order. So it would come back the same order, but it was in the same color, but slightly different. And then I would just really enjoy playing a lot and just seeing and picking images in the beginning of the process and just mashing up my own postcards together constantly and seeing what happens. and toys. Toys were a surprise. They sort of became really interesting to me. So I kept putting more and more of them in, creating environments. And this is kind of a selfie that I put in through a lot of training to see how the face breaks down, what happens. So you can see the same postcards come back again and again, because I was constantly curious about processes. And it takes a while to learn the process. I think that's the trick to this, is to consistently input different, like try to input different sets until you understand how you can actually manipulate it and how, and what the results are looking like. Something like this, which is very clear. It's a flying car still from the Soviet film. It's early in the process, so you can still see what it is, and it's just the background's becoming sort of merging slightly with, I think, my postcard images. So some of the stronger shapes do not disappear completely, they just kind of softly dissolve, I would say, into the environment. So to me, it became really interesting, futuristic way of thinking as well, that the car stays, but the background sort of becomes something else. And so I've done a lot of these cars because in that film, the future 2084, there are flying cars and they're cute. And so I input my postcards, and you can still see the car kept coming back. Let's see there. It's an interesting, I thought that it doesn't really disappear. It keeps itself there. And so this is the merge of the car with postcard image and several others. So I kept it as a character through several bodies of images. So there, didn't disappear fully, just after many, then you can see there's still the outshade, the sort of the outlines of it. And then it became more and more sort of, I guess, diluted, because I kept training it and training it and training it. And only a few shapes of it are left. And some characters keep coming back from the film stills, from my postcards. And so I became really interested in color here as well, because it became so much more complex than, because it was mixing color from different sources that I was inputting. And they become pretty beautiful to me. And I'm now really curious about printing them, seeing what happens. Some of the, I think this is a different process. This is freeform. Freeform is different. It doesn't really collage. It's more, it sort of plays with what you inputted. But to me, the creative morph process, and there's many processes, several processes on Playform, became kind of the go-to for surprising myself and for collaging. But this is freeform, which is much more painterly process and more, I guess, it was really good for coloring. So I actually downloaded all of these images from Freeform and fed them back to Aisa for playing with more of these. And so this is where it's becoming more and more what I'm wanting, which is almost these washed away, slightly, very, you can kind of see what it is, but it's ambiguous. You can see where the source is coming from, but it's sort of becoming more and more diluted and more interesting to me. I think this is a flag. And so these are, again, the Disneyland shots, which I was really curious about, sort of destructing them and then inputting them back into my sort of processes together with childhood images, etc. So closer and closer towards the end of the month, because I was now really sort of starting to really understand what I was working with, I began to really focus on what I actually wanted as end result. So something like a very controlled, like this image, like a very controlled image. What did I have to input to produce that? And so I started still experimenting with the same images, but just really being more focused on something like this, where to me it was already finished work. It became so much more painterly, so much more interesting. Something like this where many sources are already manipulated. So towards the end, I only started inputting mostly images that I have already manipulated through AI. So they have become more of a, to me, more of a finished work, more of paintings, more what I actually am as an artist. I'm gonna go back to Playform just to show a little bit more of what I was inputting. Just a minute, get back to where this share screen is. Okay, so just a little bit of more of an example of how this works. So these are the results, and these are some of my favorites because of the kind of really painterly washed away quality that I was looking for an exhibition at the end. But still with, you can see this is the process. I can slowly go through it. And there's a lot of this, so you can really see. And the inputs here. So these are the two sets that I input. And the influence is how the results, the shapes of the results will look like. And the inspiration is the original. So these are already manipulated through AI. So I was already at a point where I didn't want to input originals, original sets from the beginning. I wanted to input all of these were already. So these were manipulated and then painted digitally back into and then put back in. So layering and layering. To me, it really works like a painting, like layers and layers and layers of painting, hours and hours of work. It's just not done by you. It's done by my assistant, Aisa. Oh, it's done by a machine, by software. So some of these images are in the exhibition, and some of my favorites. These are some of the latest, I think last week of the residency or the week before. Something like this, where it absolutely looks like a painting that I would do. And this is where it became very interesting for me because I now understood how it works. So it took a month and more because I saw the process so many times. You can see my postcard manipulated before, and this is the beginning. And I was really happy with the results because it started picking up my hand that I was painting digitally on these images. It started picking up, so the black lines was really interesting to me because that's what I do in my paintings when I make them originally analog. So this image is in the exhibition, and this is the last image here, but it actually has many others that you can choose from. Also, it's really, these kind of processes are really good for animation. I'm thinking of downloading a lot of these and creating animations. So it's really helpful to, when you go through them, it's really helpful to understand how it works. But Creative Morph is what these are the results of. So something like this is very painterly to me, but this comes from my postcards. If I look at inputs, yeah, so these both sets are manipulated through Playform already. You can see them. So there are thousands of images here, which as an artist, I understood that in a month, I produced thousands of images with AI. And it was really, really exciting because I look at it as a sketchbook. I look at it as inspiration. I can look back, I can print, I can Photoshop, I can download them. So it's very playful. It's Playform. It's a very playful way of producing images very quickly. I'm thinking of creating a whole new set where I would go away from this particular subject matter of Disneyland and sort of postcards and go into something totally different just to see, now knowing how it works, just to produce and to see what actually happens to my work further and further and further. So you see that there are surprises. This is the original image, and then it merges with one of the images in the set, which is Mickey Mouse, and then it pushes it further and further. And you can keep training this until it goes into something quite different. But I stopped here because I liked the surreal quality of this image. So my exhibition, the images there are, just go back to presentation. The images there are what I chose, what I selected as kind of what I felt would look great as prints and would also really stood out to me as paintings. For example, this one is something I would absolutely paint in real life, in physical life. As a painter, it's ink. To me, it's very ink-based, it's paint-based, it's surreal, it's absurd. It's sort of floating in space, and it was a surprise, and it's one of my favorites. And many images like this, which are very painterly, and something that kind of came back to me as an artist is really looks like my work, which I didn't necessarily think that's what I wanted, or that's what would happen, but you can still see, of course, the Mickey Mouse, and you can still see the outlines of other images, but the painterly quality, the way the color is applied is very much how I work. So in a way, in a roundabout way, in the month, my AI assistant became me, and became, I guess the student became the master. So she became the artist, not the assistant, because it really looks like my work a lot, but with a twist and with new elements and much more, I guess, digitized. So there's elements that I really enjoy there because it's something I wouldn't have done. So there are surprises, and yes, so I wanted to show, so I just, so this is back to Aisa. I just also did a first, I would say, presentation performance using these images and using my AI as a character, performance on Zoom on Friday, and it was really interesting. And I'm gonna show this video. Okay. And it's just a little excerpt from that performance, and it's how Aisa merges with me, or I merge with Aisa, and I walk away. Aisa, are you there? I'm here. Are you there? Nothing here. There is nothing here. Are you there? No one. There's nothing here. Hello? 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 Anyone? All right, so that's a little excerpt of a performance. It was an hour long, sort of, I guess, pondering time travel and the future, etc. So I'm gonna go back once more to Playform platform to show a little bit of an extensive overview of how I worked in the residency. And you can see the amount of projects that I produced. And they're all slightly different. Some of them are very different. Something like this is freeform and still life put through back into training. So I'm playing with that. I was actually thinking of creating masks for my AI, or as my AI. So I was interested in this character and creating these sort of characters. And some of these come from my drawings, postcards, etc. So there's freeform. Most of these are creative morphs. So these are the childhood photos. And the inputs here. So here I input quite a lot of different ones because I wanted to see So these are collections. So you create collections, and they could be anything: internet sourced, originals, your own work, manipulated from Playform, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a never-ending process, which takes so much less time through the platform than if you were to do it on your own. And something like the black and white, which I didn't know what to do. So in the beginning, I just input my childhood photos and toys, Disney toys, and I wasn't too happy with what came back because it was basically just toys in black and white. So this is where I didn't understand how I should be manipulating this and what is the better way of doing this. So I started testing many times, and some of the projects I deleted, they're not here because I really wasn't happy with what was happening there. But I kept this because I have used some of these images as inputs for other projects. So that's kind of the nice thing about this, that you can keep redoing and redoing and training and training and training. And you can stumble on something that is extremely surprising. And this is what something like this, which I really love, an image like this, which I would love to actually, and several of these, like the colors are sort of just like it would be in printmaking, they're changing. So I would absolutely be interested in printing this large and painting into them on canvas, or even use them as projection for inspiration, which is how I'll be using a lot of this. So as I'm finishing up, I'm gonna go back to Aisa. I wanted to talk about the future of this project and how I'll be using the platform further on. Some of the images that are in the exhibition will be merged together into a large scale, I would say, mural for a solo exhibition next year. So I'm starting to work photoshopping and merging them and adding all these ideas from working with AI. I really love some of the colors and some of the washed away sort of images. So I'll be printing them on photo wallpaper for the wall and then painting around. So it'll be sort of really collaged more with my own work, with my hand, et cetera, but the beginnings, the start of it will be some of these works, especially the last works, which you can see on Artsy, something like this. I would like to see large scale printed on the wall, where a lot of these washed away colors can be really large scale and really sort of fade away into the sunset, I guess. And the solo exhibition is called Fantasyland. So it is actually all tying up together. It's from Disneyland, but it's America. So Fantasyland, Fall of the Empire, American Empire. So that's where I want to end my presentation. So thank you to Playform for providing this. I encourage you to go play, literally, make an account and go forth. It's a lot of fun, and I'll be playing. I'm starting to do new projects on there and continue my work in this digital multiverse. And so thank you, Aisa, guest from the future. And that's the name of the exhibition. And I'm going to switch to the camera, the different camera. Okay, thank you.
Now we'll open it up for questions. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself to ask Katya directly, or you can type it into the chat.
If you have questions about the app that I was using, we can talk about that. I don't know, do we have a website for them, Jennifer?
Yeah, I can put that into the chat as well. All right. Any questions about the process, Playform, the residency, as well as the exhibition now live on Artsy, which I will share as well.
Thank you so much.
So we got a comment that your work is amazing and thank you for sharing. But we also got a question about how do you see the future of art making AI as tools? Oh, of art making with AI, yes. As
with
tools.
AI. I feel it is in the future. I feel it's going to happen. It's already happening, right? We are already using it more and more. I feel that it would be, but I don't think the human hand is going anywhere. As far as we are alive on this planet, we'll be making art with our brains and hands and minds. And AI, that's why I think of it more as assistant, more of a collaborator, but as well, but between assistant collaborator, I think we will be using it more and more. I think people will realize it's actually a really big help to an artist in the studio, to an artist who is busy, who needs to produce, even just as a sketchbook, ideas, and also different ideas. Like I kept mentioning, there are surprises, and that's what I wanted. I wanted surprises because I'm always very interested in innovation and moving forward and where as an artist I would go next. And I think during pandemic, when physical spaces currently really no longer available, engagement, I'm an installation artist. I don't have audiences walking around. So to me, digital space becomes the walking around space. I immediately became interested. I played with Playform software. I found it through other artists. And I was immediately drawn to it because it's a different space. It cuts my time in half. When I want to produce something, I can do other things. That was the big thing for me because I'm also very busy as a curator. So during the day, I would be running around doing my thing and then would come back to Playform and see if I needed to train it more, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so it's in the future for sure. I don't know in what way and where will AI be fully artist. I mean, they have been experiments before, right? But they're never fully yet there. I think the machine will never be a full artist. I think humans have to feed it, I guess.
We got a question. I believe he meant, what was your biggest surprise? And
What
was
was
it a good surprise or a bad surprise?
what was my biggest surprise? I didn't think it would, to be honest, it would create so well. I didn't know what it would do because I only played a little bit before the residency. So I didn't know how vast it can go, that it can go for hours. It can, that you can actually control it. That was another thing that I didn't know to what extent I can control it with my input images and expect results like painterly or ink, which or the results that look like me, like my work. I think that was the biggest surprise for me. And that was a nice surprise because I was a little afraid that I won't like anything it produces because I'm quite particular as an artist. I have a particular hand, particular color. But when I realized I can manipulate the color, I can manipulate shapes, it just will give me a surprise in the middle. It's almost like hidden. It'll distract, it'll sort of destroy some things, it'll add things, it'll merge. And it's very different to like using Photoshop where you're fully in control. So the control element was really interesting. You have to let go and you have to be quite willing to accept that it is a software. It's not perfect, but you're also not perfect as someone who's inputting. So that's why I produce a lot, because I kept feeding it more and more because I thought, let's keep going until I'm happy. And towards the end, I was really excited with the images that are currently in the exhibition because it looks like my work and it looks like with slight surprises. So it looks like something I would produce, but would I have produced it if I didn't input into software? Probably not. So that's the surprise, I think.
Yeah, and actually, I when you mentioned that it looks like your work, I went back and looked at some of the installations that you did, and I found it really kind of
Yeah.
eerie and crazy that essentially it felt like your installations were being turned into digital paintings.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's definitely kind of like a mimicry happening where the AI is learning from you and copying you. It's like you
Mhm.
said, it's not precise because they're learning from you. They are not becoming you. But it might be kind of like, having like a little sibling following you around and copying everything that you do, and
I
not to maybe quite as precise.
Exactly. I think, but that's what I liked about it, because it really took me away from what I would do and from how I work a lot with collage. That's why I also really like the creative morph process, because it's surprising collage. And someone else is asking, was it a good surprise or bad surprise? Both. um, Mostly good, because I wanted surprises. I think if you're not ready for surprises, it might be bad. Um, but also, like, I don't look at art as bad or good. I just look at it's a process. I mean, there's failures. Like I said, I deleted some failures. I didn't really, they were too dark, for example. I didn't understand color at first, how it works in the software. So it kept being really muddy. And I think that's where I really started paying attention to my inputs. So there wasn't bad surprise. It was more like, oh, I failed because I did. And then I would look at my inputs and I thought, why did I input all these dark images plus dark images? So like two sets of dark. I didn't understand that it can't suddenly give me light and color if I didn't input it somewhere. It can only do so much. So I think that's where it's software. It's not. This is where if you produce a really dark image and you like it, and then you can print it or digitally manipulate it yourself. So this is where I started learning very quickly. I started painting over them, putting them back in so I can add lines. So it is my hand. There's a lot of my hand in there. That's why it's not a surprise really that it looks like me in the end, but I didn't put that much in of my own work. That's why it's still surprising, because it's my concepts. And then I thought, how strong do I know what I want then for it to be coming out like me? So that was a good surprise.
We got another question about was there anything that you couldn't do in Playform that you wish was there?
Um, huh. Yeah, I had a few ideas, a few thoughts, maybe more a variety of processes, maybe because I try them all, and because I work very fast and very prolific, I wanted another whole set of processes, and whatever they are, I don't know, but I would love to try. Maybe there's a process that's only particular color, or that's only this, or that's only that. That may be more control, where you do work with dark color only, or I don't know, but there's something maybe slightly, or something that resembles something, where you have actually less control than, or I don't know. So I would say more processes maybe, and more variety. I definitely would love a video function. I think it's like it wants to, animation wants to happen already. This, just if anyone's done animations, it's thousands of images anyway. So I feel like that could be a nice function, and manipulating video could be a really and playing, with images and with video, etc. Because I use this in performance, and I felt it would have been great if I could do this in the software, if I could combine video, images, performance inside. Again, don't know how, but slightly where the AI actually is more present and manipulates your videos. So because I love video works.
Yeah, and we actually have launched a new video feature within Freeform that people can go in and play with now, and they'll learn more about that feature with our next resident. Actually, I also had a question, and if anyone has any additional questions, we're about to wrap it up. But I also wanted to follow up on what you mentioned about the mural project that you're working on next. Where will this mural be, and where can we kind of hold our breath and wait for it to come soon?
Well, the solo exhibition will be at Smack Mellon in Brooklyn. Right now it's booked for, it was supposed to be now, but it's booked for March 21. So it's coming. It's the largest installation I've ever done. It's big. It's a big space. It's a big wall. Plus there's an installation in the middle with video works, and there will be a performance. But it is, because it's my postcards projects and this projects and Fantasyland. It's all, I work in a sort of one theme, usually a year. So it's kind of all about US as a Fantasyland that's failing us all. So that's where it will be. So definitely we'll be using Playform as kind of a platform, stepping, you know, into especially colors. I'm taking a lot of colors from it, and even like for paint samples. So that's where I really like the digitized color and how it dilutes it in its own way. I would do it differently as a painter. So I think that's where the surprise as well was. And I'm a colorist, so I really enjoy surprising colors.
Great. We also got one last question. I'm wondering about if you experienced moments of disappointment or how many times you felt like the AI has failed you.
Disappointment. I think it was disappointment more with my own kind of ideas, that I felt there were days when I didn't like what it produced at all. And I thought, but that's why, because I was just careless with inputting. So I think it's a software, so you need to input what you know think would be good, even though you can't really predict everything with it. It's more, I feel, again, like as an artist, I fail a lot. I fail daily, and I show, just like with this exhibition, you see the thousands I've made, but I show 15. So it's the same process. I'm very used to failure and disappointment as an artist, and especially as a physical sculpture installation artist, where things just constantly fall apart, literally. It doesn't worry me. It didn't worry me at all. It's more, you know, time where I thought, oh, I would have a new set today that I would like, and I didn't. So I would kind of revisit it. And I would sometimes, I deleted at least 5 projects that I didn't like. It's 5 sets, I would say, of where I thought muddy, dark, uninteresting, just didn't work. What did I input? So I was studying my inputs. That's how I learned the program. I would study inputs and I would study the result. And I think that's how you start understanding. Oh, it took, literally, I would study the result and go, it took this from there, and did this. So what do I want here and there, and what I want here? So yeah. You learn. It's like, it's a little bit of a school. It's a little bit of learning curve. It takes time, which I don't mind at all. Like any skill takes time.
And I think the great thing about Playform is that you can fail quickly, right? Failing fast and learning quickly. That's kind of the beauty of having an assistant to help you.
Yeah, there was a question that I wanted to, do you think AI will change the way your mind works and perceives reality in order to create art? How does this new way of creating affect you? I don't know if it can change how my mind works. I mean, that's a difficult task for anything, but it would just open possibilities. I think it's the possibility of thinking, oh, I have this idea in mind. I have a new platform I can input it in, rather than, oh, I should sketch it out. Maybe I give it to AI instead, and I don't sketch it out. And then again, I really like that it does the work for me, just as like, you know, an assistant. So I think that's where my mind just goes now. Oh, there's that project I'm thinking about. It's image-based. I need to explore different things with it. I will input it into AI rather than spend all this time sketching, or even on Photoshop. It still takes a lot of time digitally painting. I just want to put some images through, let it work, come back to it. And that's why my sketchbook is sort of becomes. So that's kind of, it didn't change, it doesn't change my mind, it just opens it. That's, I guess, the difference between, it's innovation, and I really enjoy, and I'm looking forward to seeing what I'm sure Playform will develop and, you know, move forward with new ideas. So that to me is really exciting as an artist. Yeah. And one more, have you, okay.
Oh.
Sorry, no, we have you gotten to the point that you're able to pre-visualize? A little bit, yes, definitely. I was able to pre-visualize shapes and colors much more towards the end. And that's why I studied it.
I think some people are also messaging you directly. So I just want to thank you, Katya. Thank you so much for your time. It's been just wonderful working with you. You've been an amazing resident. We've been calling Katya our valedictorian resident because just the extent to which she really just used the platform and extracted so much out of it. She's really an A+ student of everything that she does. And so it was just wonderful to work with you. All right, so now I'm just gonna wrap this up. We did get one additional question in the chat I wanted to address. Do you need to be a famous artist to be an artist in residence? Is it possible for an unknown artist to be here? That's a great question. And so our residency program, you can learn more at playform.io/residency. You'll notice that we're really looking for a diverse range of artists. We're looking for, accomplished artists that have extensive experience exhibiting, like Katya, as well as looking for artists that, are emerging, that are really new, but might have some kind of different edge or, some kind of uniqueness about them. We're also looking for artists that are just willing to play and experiment with us. That's really the purpose of this program. We want to really explore the future of art and push boundaries. And so we're looking for artists who are willing to do that alongside us. So thank you to Katya for sharing her work with us today. And just a reminder, the exhibition Guests from the Future is now on view at Artsy. I've shared the link in the post, and you can also just go to playform.io/Katya and it'll direct you there as well. Also, if you're an artist, as I mentioned, you can go to playform.io/residency to learn more about the Playform residency program. Thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to seeing what you create on Playform. Thank you.